Okay, it looks like we're good to go. It is August 23rd at 5:32 p.m. and this is the NPS SPED subcommittee. And for the minutes taker, we're going to just go around the room. I'm Erica DePalma, BOE and chair of this committee. And on my screen, Dr. Perry, you are up first.
So hi, I'm Dr. Perry. I'm the educational administrator for SRBI.
Okay, and Amy?
I'm Amy Hodgins. I'm a parent of 2 kids in Nora Public Schools, one over at Fox Run and one at Ponus.
And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Steiner. I'm a parent of a child at Merrimack Elementary School.
Okay. And Suzanne?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Korshitz. I'm a member of the BOE.
Okay. Dr. Estrella?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Alexandra Estrella, superintendent.
And Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily Hare. I'm a speech pathologist at Fox Run.
And Rob?
Good evening, everyone. Rob Pennington, Assistant Superintendent of Schools.
Okay. Fatima?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Fatima Susanna Tejada. I'm the Education Administrator of Specialized Instruction.
And Marissa?
Hi all, Marissa Mangone. I have a 6th grader going into Nathan Hale and 5th grader starting Villa Maria.
Okay, and Eric?
Hi, Eric Niederer, parent of an incoming 8th grader at Ponus Ridge Middle School and an incoming 5th grader at Fox Run Elementary School.
Okay. And with that, before we get started on tonight's main topic, we have some minutes from the previous meeting. Those minutes have been distributed. And Suzanne, did you have any corrections to the minutes?
No corrections to the minutes.
Okay. If there are no corrections, then we can approve the minutes as distributed.
So moved.
All right. Okay. And with that, we'll hand it over to Rob and Fatima.
All right, so just really quick, last week we sent out a thought exchange to get feedback on our reopening plan, and Fatima has put together a presentation and she's going to share some of the questions that were asked and some of the answers. So I'm just going to pass the mic over to Fatima.
Thanks, Rob. So I'm just going to share my screen with you all so that we can all follow along. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to try to put it on presentation mode. Yeah. Where am I up here? Yeah. Okay, so actually the first slide.
Fatima, it's not showing on presentation mode. It's actually showing the presenters mode for some reason on. Try clicking the button on the bottom right-hand side and see if that makes a difference. The presentation slide, if you move the tool,
Yeah.
Try that.
There we go.
There you go.
Better now? Okay. And I'm going to minimize this. All right. So this is, okay, so I'm going to go here. So I wanted to start the meeting today by just quickly putting up a little bit about myself and Dr. Perry. So this slide just basically tells you who I am, some of my professional background in administration, for those of you who might not know exactly where I came from. And then the very bottom there just gives you a little bit of information about my education. So I'm currently with you all at Nora Public Schools. Prior to that, I was in Stanford Public Schools as an IEP coordinator, compliance coordinator. And then I also did some special instruction coaching of building administration and staff. Prior to that, I was an administrative intern with Greenwich Public Schools. for 2 years. And if you look below, as I said, my education, I got my administrator certification from Sacred Heart University. I have a 6-year in remedial reading and language arts from the University of New England, and a master's in early childhood special education from NYU, as well as general ed. And prior to that, I got my bachelor's degree in marketing and finance from Manhattan College in the city. And this is a little bit about Dr. Perry. And again, as well, her professional experience and her education. She also put her email address at the bottom below there. So she comes to us from Stanford Public Schools as well. Prior to that, she was at Glen Holmes School and previously with the Fishfield Public Schools and Greenwich Public School System. Her education, she has her doctorate in administration degree from the University of New England. And prior to that, she went to the University of Connecticut and received her master's and bachelor's of arts in special education. So that's just again a little bit about us so that you know where we come from and our experiences as we begin our professional and educational journey with you all. So through Thought Exchange, as Rob had discussed previously, we had gathered all of your information or all of the questions that you had, and I compiled them in a way in which it would sort of make, they were all sort of go together. So this was the first few that I thought had a similar theme, which was that in-person learning piece. So why isn't remote learning an option? And I'll just read each question and then give you my response as to why. So again, this is coming straight from the Connecticut Department of Ed, as it mandated that all schools return to in-person instruction. There's no hybrid or remote learning options. This information was also on the slides 8 and 9 under the NPS opening plan document that is located on our NPS webpage. And any information as well regarding mask mandates and requirements can be found there on our NPS webpage. The next question, will all services be provided in person? That would be a yes. All services will be provided in person, again, as per the Connecticut Department of Education. Will there be pullout or services or in person? So we're going to follow the IEP recommendations for push-in or pull-out services. As it reads, it's our legal document. That is what we are supposed to be abiding by. So if it's a push-in session or a pull-out session, that's what we will be doing. What would learning look like if we have to pivot to remote learning? Again, it was specifically delineated in the Norwalk Public Schools opening plan document on our website. It's specifically slide number 20 or page 20 of the NPS opening plan, and it'll tell you specifically what happens if a child has to quarantine, if a whole class, if a teacher has to quarantine. So all of that information can be found there. The next one that pertains to the in-person learning is if parents and volunteers are not allowed in the schools, how will you hold in-person PPT meetings as an option? So visitors are actually allowed in service to the child. So if you're going for a PPT meeting, then absolutely you are invited in. You must, however, show your vaccination certificate or proof of negative COVID test, just as required by our staff. So again, you are invited if it's in service to the child. So the next question was, what is the plan for Norwalk Public Schools? And again, the plan, the document with the very specifics of all of this is located on our website, on the NPS webpage. That front page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see our plan that was discussed last week with the superintendent and the deputy superintendent of facilities, excuse me. The next set of questions were based on services. So what is the protocol going to be to ensure that every student in every school will have their services delivered in a timely manner? So again, in compliance with the IDEA, schools will implement IEPs accordingly. In the event the parents do not believe the services were delivered, it's encouraged to request a PPT to review the child's program. Will there be enough staff to implement the student IEP? So the district is responsible for providing the necessary staff to implement a student's IEP. If they are concerned about IEP implementation, again, it is highly encouraged that the parents contact their principal to understand the information that was not had. And finally, what will happen if there's a quarantine? Will services still be provided? So we will defer to the Connecticut State Department of Education guidelines as far as the time of quarantine, but we will provide services if the student is quarantined. Again, this specific information is on slide 20 under the Nora Public Schools opening plan document. And it's again delineates when it's a teacher who needs to go on quarantine, when it's a child, when the classroom, if that were the case, what would happen in terms of services, but they will be provided services. The next set of questions is based on safety protocols. So the question was, what is the plan for keeping the classroom clean? So schools will be cleaned and sanitized according to adopted procedures, the rigorous standards will continue. Ms. Fios also, when we were discussing our Nora Public Schools opening plan, all that information is in that document located on our NPS webpage. And what are the safety protocols for all students and staff? Again, in the Nora Public Schools opening plan, specifically slides 15 and 17, it delineates what our safety protocols are as per Ms. Fios. Regarding SEL, the questions were, what is the district doing for students who have regressed because they needed to be remote? So as always, we are performing benchmark assessments in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. There will be ongoing progress monitoring of all students and the data from the standardized testing administered and other aligned academic screeners. Dr. Perry will also be sharing with us a little bit more about the SRBI process in order for this to occur with fidelity and make sure that we have the information needed. What opportunities will students have to engage with peers? Peer relationships suffer due to lack of advisories and SEL opportunities. So SEL remains a priority for us in our district-wide strategic improvement plan, and all schools K-12 are required to implement social emotional learning throughout their school day. So again, it's a requirement, and it's expected of our district for this to be something that we are doing throughout the day in terms of the social emotional learning. So the two questions that came up regarding our programs are, how are teachers and buildings selected for specialized programs? So while we have we consider multiple variables when selecting a specialized learning program, all the programs provided by the district are made available to the students that can benefit from them district-wide. In terms of why they're not available at all middle schools, it's the more viable alternative to educating the student within the district based on the student's need at the given time, and providing an opportunity to work their way back to their home school. It's not necessary. Unfortunately, there's a lot more to this question, and we would like to at some point be able to provide that. But right now, it's sort of where we are, and we can absolutely continue to have this discussion. But there's a lot of variables that go into the programs and where they are. All right, so we have a few more related services questions actually. So will speech therapists have the ability to utilize outside classroom space when the weather permits to allow the removal of masks? So this is an absolute yes. And masks, and they'll be worn while outdoors. They don't have to be worn in any programs that are being held outside. There's no mask requirement. So to that second point, will masks be worn at all times during speech services? Yes, when they are indoors, but any programs that are being held outside, the masks are not a requirement at this point. And then the last one was, how will social distancing be maintained during OT, PT, and speech services? So again, we're following the guidelines, and we are going to instill that 3 feet social distance when feasible. So that's how that we're going to approach that. Oh, I feel like I'm missing something. There was something else. All right, I'm sorry. I think I might have missed another one, but I'm gonna stop sharing now for a second. Where is, okay. Do you guys still see my screen? There we go.
Not
Okay.
anymore.
All right. So there was actually two other questions. I don't know why they didn't make it in here. So one of them was, how do parents know who their first line of communication is when an issue arises? So we again actually do have this specific visual on the NPS website, but the information will be made available on the website for all of us. And again, on slide 24, it specifically shows who your first line of contact should be. So it should be your child's teacher, the school building administrator, the special ed supervisor, and then myself at central office. We will be putting that on the website because we want to make sure that, again, we're being transparent and the parents know exactly where to go and who to ask any questions if they arise, and sort of what the ladder of leadership is when there are questions in terms of your child's education or something that involves the IEP meeting, the PPT, etc. Dr. Perry, would you like to speak a little bit about our SRBI process and how we're going to move along with that?
Sure. So just to explain to the team, I just wanted to go over what SRBI is. So it's scientifically research-based intervention. The great thing is that grades K through 8 have that block built into their day daily for 30 minutes. And we have those tiered interventions at the levels of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We do have the supports and the intervention programs that those students can receive that support from interventionists and coaches either daily or when is needed, depending on the tier and the intervention support required. That is a general education support. So that is the way that Fatima and I are able to work together hand in hand, where they start at the SRBI process. If they are struggling based on the assessments and the benchmarks given at the grade level, like Fatima said, we look at those benchmarks at those 3 times a year. So the fall, the winter, and the springtime. And we look at that assessment data and then see who would be appropriate for which tiers based on that intervention support. And then they could receive that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 intervention support for about 8 to 10 weeks. And then we analyze that data, monitor their data and progress, and we would assess if they are maintaining progress and doing well with that tier 2 support. Did they make enough progress that they don't need that intervention support and they could go back to the universal intervention at the tier 1, or move up to a more restrictive environment in the sense of tier 3. We do not look at referrals until we see that the intervention supports are filled through with fidelity and efficacy, and then we can looking at what the teams need further based on students that are making minimal progress based on all the intervention support done at all those levels. Now, when we talk about this SRBI process, we also talk about the parent communication being involved, so that if they're involved in tier 2 or tier 3, that parents would receive communication from the school and a referral letter home that they would be receiving that intervention support either 2 times a week, 3 times a week, or maybe even daily, depending on the need. So that's some of the SRBI information.
Can I just add a few things to
Absolutely.
the conversation? So one of the things coming into the district last year that was made very clear to me was the concern that a lot of parents had between the time that the PPT happened prior to that PPT, the process it took to identify that the child had a specific need, and how long it took to get to the point of sitting down and talking about the child needing an IEP. And a lot of that was because there was concern in terms of how SRBI was structured within the district or not, and needing to like further develop that process so that if a child really needed anything beyond a tier 3 intervention, that those services would be immediately provided. So in conversation with the team prior to Dr. Perry coming in, one of the first things that we did as we built the plan for this year was really rethink how we programmed the district to ensure that we embedded the SRBI blocks, either SRBI or enrichment blocks necessary to support students in that process. So like Dr. Perry articulated today, now we have built, we're building the structure so that the work that she's talking about is able to happen. I think one of the misconceptions a lot of times that happens with SRBI is that after a 6 to 10 week cycle of support, people assume that automatically the child needs to be referred to a PPT. And in reality, there could be a number of cycles that happen because we are supporting the child in different areas of need. And if the child continues to make progress throughout that time, there is no need to refer to a PPT because they're making gains over time. Now, when we get to the point when that child has not demonstrated any progress, that's where we then come in and have conversations with the families about the PPT process. But the other piece that we're working to build on is how, at what points do we engage parents in further conversation about the child's progress? And how do we actively maintain a progress monitoring approach that the parent is well aware of throughout the process? And that's one of the things that Dr. Perry and Ms. Suzanne Tejada is also working on, really developing a scope and sequence of what that work will look like, because it's something that right now is not holistically built within the district at large. And I just wanted to put that in because there was some before Dr. Perry came in, there was work that was started in preparation for the work that she will be doing that I think is important for you to be aware of. I turn it back to you.
Dr. Estrella, can you speak to the training that's taken place over the summer that prepares our teachers for data collection that is needed to be able to monitor that progress correctly?
So I think it's twofold. The first element of professional learning that happened was with the school leaders. One, to help them understand the work that needs to be done based on what we learned from this past review with Dr. Katzman. They spent a full day of training, just understanding the priorities, understanding what that meant in practice, and what their role as school leaders will look like. Because one of the things that has shifted is that now supervisors will not be conducting teacher evaluations, because we really want them to focus on the data collection process, working with the principal and teachers to support those students that need the support, but also to support them through the PPT process. So the idea also is that we want our principals to understand that all students are their students, and that just because a child has an IEP or receiving specialized services, it doesn't mean that it becomes the responsibility of someone else. They are part of the school community. We want to make sure that they're fully integrated into the school community. And because the way that things were structured was that different people were supervising different components of the building, that unified approach of making sure that the staff and students felt that they were part of one body was missing in many cases. And it was very evident as you walked through the buildings that programs were in silos in different parts of the building. So one of the things that we worked on this summer is really building the principal's capacity, understanding what an instructional leader looks like, but most importantly, what does an instructional leader do to well service students that have IEPs, support teachers that are servicing those students, and most importantly, work in collaboration with the supervisors to ensure that services are effectively implemented and provided. With that, as part of the programming structure, one of the things that we built in is teacher team time so that teachers could come together and have conversations of student progress and development, be able to talk about either cohorts of students or students as a whole in terms of how they were progressing around certain standards, whatever needs students have. We needed to have a time where teachers could engage in those conversations, and those structures have been built into the program, as well as we have members of the cabinet team that have been working with teacher leaders and coaches in supporting them in becoming the facilitators and leaders of these teacher teams within the building. So that not only are principals being trained in how to do this work, but also a cohort of individuals that will become the instructional leadership team in the school have also been trained to support this work. Because in the conversations that I had with many of you and other parents that are here today, what I kept hearing was that the PPT process was taking an extensive amount of time because people were coming in unprepared and not having adequate data or information to really sit and engage in the conversation. So we wanted to make sure that we built into the normal schedule opportunities for those for that work to happen, but also we wanted to free up the supervisor's time to make sure that they engage in their due diligence and making sure that adequate data collection and gathering took place. I know, I don't know, Fatima, if you want to talk about a little bit the caseload and how you have been working with the supervisors also to ensure that we are proactive, not reactive in planning for PPTs and supports for students.
Sure, absolutely. So again, trying to build the capacity and making sure that our supervisors and teachers are ready with the data collected or the data that they need in place to come ready for these meetings. We have started sort of compiling our list of students and making sure that we have their information ready. We know when their next annual review is or their triennial. And making sure that whatever evaluations that needed to be done or progress monitoring that needed to be had are ready upon their arrival to school, so that when we come and meet with you for whether it's a review of revise or another annual PPT meeting, we have all of the information that we need gathered. Another thing that we have been doing is also looking at that caseload and making sure, again, that we're planning our meetings with more than enough time allotted, so that if there are other components that are missing in terms of information that we need to gather for you before that meeting, that those are also in place, and just making the supervisors and our teams aware that they are able to make those decisions right at the table. Again, if and when we are ready with the information or with the data to make those informed decisions for the students. Again, what we're looking for is to make sure that those recommendations are exactly what our students need, so we can see the progress that we're striving for when we sit at those PPT meetings.
Because one of the things I heard from many of you is that a lot of times the decisions of what services would be provided were not happening in those in the meeting itself. There was a lot of conversation, oh, we have to get back to you on that. And our goal is to really ensure that it is a collaborative process, that it is a partnership in conversation, and that decisions are happening before we conclude those PPT meetings are concluded. which is something I heard multiple times from different parents was not necessarily the practice that was continuously happening. So we want to make sure that supervisors are well prepared or working with teachers and principals to ensure they have all of the resources and tools that they need to make the necessary decisions in the best interest of our students at the table. Because I know that was something that many parents were concerned about because that was not necessarily the norm. I hope I answered your question, Erica.
You did. In terms of timing, we've also talked about how many days we give parents to digest information prior to a PPT. Have we, as a district, like nailed down, a goal for how far out that we can get those materials to our parents?
So just a clarifying question. So you're asking once, let's say their evaluations are again progress monitoring reports, you want to know how many days prior to the meeting you should be getting these documents?
Yes, we've had instances where parents have reported it coming in at the meeting a few hours before the meeting, and it's a heavy, dense, report that's coming over. And our goal in partnership with the SPED PAC was that we could back that up and make a commitment to parents that we'd get it to them by, whatever lead time we thought was feasible.
Okay, so my personal thought on that is that we should absolutely make sure that you have them at least 5 days prior to the meeting, so that again, if you have any questions, if you need to digest information, if you need to do your own research, that you are able to again write down whatever questions you might have, and you can contact the teacher. So they should be calling you minimum 3 days prior to the meeting with information or sitting with you to make sure that they're going over whatever the report is. And if you have any questions prior to that, you can discuss it at that point or a mutually convenient time for the two of you. But again, you should be coming into that PPT meeting with all of the information you need so that you can sit down and basically have a discussion about what the best recommendations are for the student.
And that lead time, as part of a new process, it's going to be socialized to all of our providers and teachers.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great.
May I ask a question about that? I'm sorry. May I ask a question about that return time? How are we going to deal with our Spanish community who need those documents translated? Will it also be a 3-day prior to the PPT for them?
So what I have done in the past is that specifically with the Spanish speakers or with the multilingual individuals, we have someone calling them, not necessarily translating the documents. So we have someone calling them and discussing what the report specifically is saying, so that they understand whether it's because it's a clinical report or an academic one. So we, more so than giving them the physical document in their native language, we want to have a conversation with these parents to ascertain that they understand what's in there. Then we would give them again the English version of what we have, but the discussion at least we should be having with that parent 3 to 5 days prior to the meeting. In terms of the physical document, turnaround time in their own language, that is something that's a separate discussion that I do need to have to see how quickly we can, and if it's a feasible thing to do versus again having the direct communication with the parent, because I think it's better understood if we have a discussion versus giving them the document and just sort of again trying to read through it but not necessarily understanding what's on the paper. I'm sorry, Dr. Estrella, you were going to say something to this as well.
No, I was just saying I don't know if you want to speak to the timeline that we were talking about earlier this few days ago about the process and how we were going to provide kind of a Venn diagram for the parents to understand the steps and how many days they should expect to receive or engage at different points in the process.
right? So we are, again, Dr. Perry, Rob and I, and Dr. Estrella, we were all discussing that we would like to have a document so that you can also all be, and put it up on the website so that we can all be aware of what the dates, the timelines, and the processes are, so that it's clear. Again, a visual, I think, is very helpful, whether you are, multilingual or not, so that you can understand where we're going when we are on a specific spot with our student. So I'm hopeful that that will also appease or sort of help some of the anxiety around knowing what to do and who to go to as well, Jen. So that's the way that we're sort of working towards and planning to do the work, so that we are, again, more transparent and clearer in our communication with you as parents prior to the meetings.
And even in some cases, even with the SRBI process, we're like, Rob, I don't know if you want to talk about the if-then document that we were discussing as well, because I think that's important for parents to know. And remember, like most of the team here is fairly new, so we're in the process of a lot of design and building. So I just want to ask for your patience a little bit. Give us a few weeks to get everything rolling. But I just want you to know that the team has been thinking a lot about many of the things that you've brought to life to us, and really thinking about the most effective way to support you through this process. But most importantly, to humanize the process, because what I've heard a lot of times is that it feels like a battle versus a collaborative conversation. And that's part of the culture that we're trying to shift. It's not going to happen overnight, because when you deal with people, you deal with reacculturating and retraining people around what the new expectations are. But I think that setting up norms around what we expect and making you, the parent, aware of what our expectations are will help us have a kind of a triangulated check and balance to ensure that as we're building capacity, we're getting feedback of the effectiveness of what we're implementing, and it will help us continuously fine tune what we're doing to make it better. But Rob, I think it's important that if you want to add to the if-then piece that we were discussing, particularly around SRBI.
Absolutely. So as we build in our SRBI systems and structures, it's going to really be important that we build in if-then document. So if a child is struggling with, say, decoding, then these would be the interventions, and this would be the amount of time, and here's the progress monitoring, so that parents can be able to see exactly what their child is working on, depending on the need. And so as we look to build out this system and structure, that is, creating the visual is really going to be important, so that parents are involved in the SRBI process and can see exactly what the timelines are, so that it's a transparent process as well. And that's something that we are going to be building throughout this year with Dr. Perry, and that I really feel will help us to be able to support our students. And if it's working, then that's great. Then maybe they would move back into tier 1. And if they need more support, then they can move into either into a tier 3 intervention. But having this system and process that we follow, and certain interventions that we use to support whatever the child's need is. And that's something that we have some interventions, and we're just being very strategic about what we use for what.
Erica, it's Eric Niederer. Can I just, I didn't want to cut anybody off, but can I have a quick comment?
Of course.
So we're talking about the IEP process and information and discussions with families, and the informational documents and grids and diagrams that you were talking about. I didn't know if you were going to include specific sections on the prior written notice, as well as educational evaluations, including IEEs. I can tell you as a parent, it took me several years to just understand what written prior notice page was and how important it was to document properly within the contract, which is the IEP. as well as not just the availability as a potential for educational evaluations, but specifically IEEs. And I can tell you that eroded a lot of trust early on. We're talking years ago before any of you guys were involved, but kind of not understanding the system and no one telling me about the system, despite, you know, you just getting this document as an early, especially as an early parent that has the procedural safeguards. I read through them. I kind of understood them, but I didn't really understand them until years later. So, you know, if we're talking about, you know, full transparency and trust building with the families, which I do think is the intent of the current administration, I would just ask that there be some, you know, some basic level discussion and understanding about that. And I can tell you, as the years passed and I got real comfortable with my various teams, and there was trust built within the school-based teams, it didn't even become an issue of, hey, I want an IEE or else we have to go to due process. It was okay, let's have do we all think an evaluation is appropriate? And then you have trust at the school level. But again, for transparency and trust, I guess the question is there going to be a section on those two areas? And the comment is, I think it's very important, especially in the trust building and the school-based team approach. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. So all of those elements will be part of the flow diagram. One of the things that I didn't speak to Fatima or any of the guys here about this, but I did speak, so my apologies, guys. But this is something I spoke with Brenda Williams about some of the work that we're doing with the Family Center. And one of it is providing workshops to educate parents about the process from start to finish, even prior to even people even thinking about it. So just opening up opportunities for parents on different topics of interest that we want to provide, for lack of a better word, training for parents so that they know even prior to, if they ever come across a circumstance where they need to go through the process, that they understand all of the elements. And I think it would be also very beneficial for someone even who already has gone through the process to engage in these workshops, because they will provide insight into how we're moving the work forward, but most importantly, just in the context of any parent that wishes to further educate themselves in terms of the different legal components of what your rights are as a parent, what the rights of your child are, from A through Z. We're looking to engage in some of like these different workshop sessions to support families in that work. But as part of the kind of what I will call the scope and sequence of A through Z, within the process, definitely IEEs will be included in like the prior written notice, because it's part of the process.
And just to
Great.
sort of
Sorry. Thanks so much. You know, the language and the initiatives that you're talking about, if they come through to fruition, I think it's a great step. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Just to piggyback off of what Dr. Estrella was saying, again, today in our conversation regarding SRBI and the process, we want to make sure that it's, again, a collaborative environment between the parents, the schools, and central office, just everyone involved for the improvement and progress of our student. So we want to make sure that, again, this process is very clear, and we will be giving you all as parents and newer parents to NPS, et cetera, just information as to what the process should look like. Again, those if-then flowcharts, and it comes down to starting with our tier 1 instruction. If we see that there isn't progress in any particular area, we want to make sure that, again, we're speaking with you from that point and say, oh, this is what, these are some of the things that I want to try. If tier 2 instruction needs to be had with the student, this is what we have been doing. It's working, it's not working. If we need to go to tier 3, this is the process. So again, just keeping you informed throughout each of those, throughout the process in general, so that when you do have questions, or if questions arise from what we're doing, so that we're not again, coming to the point where we might need to go to PPT1, but that you've been informed and you're getting the information as you need, or as, you know, if you're confused and there's something that you're sort of anxious about, that we already have those process and systems in place, so that throughout every step of the way, you're feeling comfortable with our open line of communication, and or if there's anything that you recommend or think that should be happening, that we can also, again, have a discussion to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our student. Because at the end of the day, we want to see them progressing. However, we need to make sure that they're progressing effectively.
I just had one quick point I just wanted to make, is that I think it's really such a great idea to have something that's, you know, Norwalk based, and the dates and the expectations for parents. And I just think it's really important that that information is relayed to special ed staff so that they know the expectations, because I think there's a bit of variability right now among different schools. And previously we would have our IEP compliance meetings where special ed administration would let the IEP compliance person know for each school, who would then relay that information to their school-based team. And I think it would be a great way for us to continue to have, you know, all Norwalk special educators on the same page about those dates. So I'd hate for some parents to be like, well, I saw on the site it was 3 days and I got it 2 days, etc.
Just so that you know, and Fatima, sorry to interrupt, but like in terms of the principal work, because that's the work that I'm leading, I'm in collaboration with the team. Principals will always be the first to be trained on a lot of the processes that we are then embedding district-wide. I think one of the things that was a challenge in the past was that different constituents were being trained for different things, and the principals in many cases didn't know until somebody else informed them. So we have built in quarterly meetings where Dr. Katzman, alongside the members of the team here, will be building capacity with the principals. In those conversations, a lot of what you are articulating, Emily, in terms of making sure that they understand the expectations, and with the expectation that they will further engage their school community so that their teachers are aware of the time frames and protocols that have shifted. Supervisors, and Emily and Fatima can speak more about her structure in terms of the supervisor component, will also have engaged in the principal training so that they are also abreast in terms of the work and expectations moving forward. But we've built in at all levels, especially those individuals that will be facilitating learning for other adults in the building, so that everyone is on the same page. But most importantly, I think a big missing link in the past was that sometimes principals were the last to know, or were not part of the big picture framing of the work. And now everything first starts with the principal and then breaks down into the other constituencies. Because if the principal doesn't believe in the vision or the work we're trying to do, then it's going to be very hard for anyone else to come in and try to implement. So we're making sure that the principals are, and the assistant principal CISDs, because the principal CISDs and APs are all getting the same training. We have the second Tuesday of the month and the third Tuesday of the month are the days that we train the leadership in the district. And we have a very clear cycle of support to do that. I don't know if Fatima, you want to speak more about the supervisors and your weekly structure.
So what we are basically working towards is, again, just to sort of build the capacities of our supervisors and our building administrators. Is, again, I'm also having weekly meetings with them, and with your help, of course, through the thought exchange, those specific areas that sort of continue to resonate and were areas that we could clearly show improvement on are things that we're going to focus on and develop with the supervisors. Again, in those principal meetings, I will also be a part of them, and we will make sure that the information that was received through all of the exchanges that we will be having will also be shared with the principals as well. Throughout the year, I will also be sort of just sitting in on some of these PBTs to see what areas of development we also need to continue to work on. And throughout the year, again, we will make sure that we are focus on those areas of improvement that you as parents think is needed, that the leadership team also focuses on or sees. And again, during our weekly meeting, we will sort of break down and inform them, this is how things should have worked out, what could have been different, what could have changed, etc. So again, it's all about building the capacity and making sure that we're not sort of reverting back to our ways and needing to leave meetings sort of feeling uncertain about where we're going and our plan with our student.
It sounds like you have a really robust plan on how to help our kids and support administrators, and the quality and quantity of communication. The plan sounds so much better. Do you have any concerns that you don't have the human resources to do this increased amount of work, or do you feel like the new structure that you have in place that you're in good shape, at least to start to get some feedback on the new processes and see how it's going?
I mean, I think that we have that because of the new sort of structure, it will lend itself to being able to start the work. Like Dr. Estrella said, I don't think it's going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It's a very big sort of culture shift. But again, I'm hoping that with your help and sort of your feedback and what you are all hearing and about how others are feeling, and with the small sort of tweaks that I envision us moving towards, that we will see the small improvements, but over time, they will come more rapidly and it'll be sort of more significant. So that again, when we are sitting at these meetings and when we are just having discussions and we're feeling like we're having more collaborative discussions moving toward more positive outcomes for the students. Because after all, again, that's what we're here for. And I just want to make sure that all of the parents, regardless of where the walks of lives are or where their students are, sort of want to, be transparent with us and say, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm seeing, or, how can we help each other in this way? So again, with our new structures, though, I think that I will be able to, and because it's a sort of a team situation, that we will be able to make some of these robust changes that I'm looking forward to with my team and the organization as a whole.
And I think just to add to what Fatima says, Erica and I were having a question about caseload. And right now, Nora doesn't really have a structured formula by which we determine how many individuals we need in the school based on number of students, number of hours, and service. And we had a conversation with Dr. Kastman about this, because we could be very prescriptive and say X number of students, X number of hours equates to this. But every building has different needs. Like every child has very specialized needs, and whatever service hours are required are very unique and different. So one of the things that we will be doing is reanalyzing how caseloads are distributed amongst the district. Because Eric and I had a really robust conversation about NARAMEC, for instance, and we had to make some adjustments in personnel as a result of what we learned. So Fatima's work a lot this year is also going to encompass working with Dr. Katzman and really looking at how do we become more formulaic about how do we make an initial determination of need, but then how do we then dive in to really understanding the needs of a particular school to ensure we have the right people in the team. And that might fluctuate how many people we will need. But that work is going to take the scope of this year for us to really dive deep and analyze and dissect. So that there will be a potential shift in need in terms of personnel, even might be less in some places, more in others. But we won't have a definitive answer until Fatima, in collaboration with Dr. Kastman and her team, dive deeper into what is currently present and what needs to be modified. But one thing we do know, just given that one example this summer, that we really have to rethink how we are dispersing resources across the district based on a number of students, but most importantly, what is the individualized needs of every single child, and how many hours does that require from a provider, and do we have enough providers to provide those services?
Thank you.
I have a question jumping back to the question on pullouts versus push-ins. I think that parent was probably asking if the pullouts will be in the general ed classroom as they were this year as a result of COVID, or if they'll actually be pulled out to a separate room this year. And I don't think we answered that piece.
The schedules will return to normal. So they will be pulled out as they were pre-COVID.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Did anybody else have any other questions?
I have a quick question. If a student has an IEP and they also need the intervention through the, I totally forgot the name, RBI,
SRBI?
Thank you. So many acronyms. Are they able to get their IEP services on top of getting interventions if it's needed? Or is it one or the other?
If a child has an IEP, then they shouldn't be receiving SRBI. Because the purpose of SRBI is to provide additional supports within a general ed setting. If a child already has been identified with a particular need, they might be getting additional services during the SRBI block, but not necessarily SRBI services, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, SRBI is tiered instruction prior to us getting to the point of needing to have meetings to see if the child needs specialized services. So it's completely separate. Because it's sort of the preview to see where we're going to go with our student. Are they going to remain in general education setting, or will they need those specialized services?
So the results of the testing could result in maybe some goal changes on the IEP if weaknesses is shown.
Or if they, like, our hope is that whatever supports they're receiving will result in eliminating goals because they have been able to meet those expectations. And it could be the modification of goals to challenge the student even further, or even start the consideration of mainstreaming them into a general education setting.
Okay, thank you.
I was hoping you could also clarify for homebound students, the medically fragile students that choose to pursue that path this year. What we heard you say was it's 5 hours a week for K through 8, I believe, and then 10 for high school. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, if I got that number wrong. What I'm looking to clarify for the community is for those of us who have IEPs and they have an extensive amount of service hours in those IEPs, how does that work when we're saying 1 hour of homebound, but we know our IEPs have several hours on them for services? How are we going to deliver in that environment?
So I'll take that one. So in terms of the 5 hours for K5 and 10 hours for 6-12, it would be, that is for the core supports. We would then also have some supports for services, service providers as well.
And do we know yet, or is it specific to the service, if those services would be delivered virtually?
That is an option.
It is an option. Okay. Okay.
The only other piece I just wanted to share, going back to Miss Susanna Tejada's conversation earlier, was around And it's an example of a flow chart. So can you see this when you have a concern? Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this was a great presentation so that if a parent has a concern, they would obviously start with the teacher, and then they can move up the ladder of referral, ultimately leading with specialized learning, leading to Miss Susanna Tejada. But this is just an example that we can, for parents, so that they can see this is a flow chart of what to do when, where to go when you have a concern, because that's a really important piece for us, that families know what to do and where to go when they have a concern. So I just
Rob,
wanted to
can we add to this some reasonable timelines that parents can use as a guide for how quickly they should move through this process? I just, as an example, had a parent say to me, I reached out to a principal, they said, I'll get back to you next week. Is that acceptable? You know, so like, do we have like a commitment at all these steps that we'll get back to them within 24 to 48 hours? Is that something we can add to this chart?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Estrella.
I think that in terms of this process, this is something more universal district-wide, but we can definitely set time limits on these. If a principal is asking to get back to a parent because they're trying to problem solve on the concern after a week, it might not be unreasonable, but it depends what the request is. But we can set timeframes in terms of how quickly those individuals need to respond from the parent's initial contact, and then cycling back to a resolution. We can do that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Erica, can I just add one thing that I think is important? One thing here, again, this is all historic, but Alex, one thing that I've heard from parents time and time again over the years is if there's a request for a PPT, how quickly should it occur? We all know that there's, state guidelines and due process guidelines, but parents usually are unaware of it. And again, this is historical before you. That would not always be complied with. So I think that's very helpful where there is a concern that there's a specific timeline that's encoded in the documents.
So one of the things that I've been talking to the team about is in that scope and sequence that we're going to build from like the initial, either if the SRBI team refers a child and the parent agrees for evaluation, that will lead to a PPT, from a parent making an initial recommendation to wanting the child to be evaluated for a PPT meeting. Making sure that we set the clear timeframes. We know what the state guidance is, but we're going to try to tighten that to constrict it to less time, because if we want to be in compliance based on state mandates, we have to set boundaries that are less than that. So that is part of the plan, to clearly articulate for parents how long each step should take. So that, I'm sorry, my phone is talking, my watch is talking to me. So that you guys are clear about, if I put in a letter today, within 48 hours, I should get an initial email from the principal stating that they're going to set that one-on-one conversation to talk about your rationale for requesting an evaluation. And in that meeting, it could be that the principal has a conversation, talks about the SRBI practices, and recommends initially, before we go into a PPT, let's try some intervention services. And the parent might agree. If the parent agrees, then automatically that kicks in to place the child to receive SRBI services. Now, if the parent does not want that and wants to move forward with the PPT, then the principal should be able to walk them through that process and give them the time frame. But we will articulate that in the flow chart so the parent has an idea of what to expect when they're engaging the different constituents through the process.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions from the group?
Can I just say something? I just want to mention, I just want to thank Rob and Dr. Estrella and everyone who was involved with helping Merrimack. And I know it came up, and I think it's going to help a lot of kids. And I love the process that's going to go forward with looking at all the schools and really diving deep and seeing what we need to help our SPED students the most. And I think it's going to really elevate Norwalk into being the great SPED district that it can be. And I think this is a great first step. And I just want to say thank you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how well this goes for all of our schools. So thank you guys very much for that. And Erica, thank you.
The only thing I ask that when we have to like advocate for our budget, that you guys are there in the front line fighting with me.
Good answer.
Just let me
Good
know I'm
answer.
there. I'm there. I'm
Yes.
not a quiet person. I'll be there, I promise.
Well, Alex, I think that's an important comment, because I think, one thing I'd like to say, and I don't want to prolong the meeting, but I really hope that the Common Council, the mayor's office, and all the decision makers, the BET, that they really recognize what you're trying to do, not just for special ed, but for gen ed as well. And that Norwalk has so many great things going for it. Everybody talks about diversity. That's absolutely correct. There's so many other things as well. Honestly, everything that you guys are doing, the diversity, the special ed, the gen ed, because I also have a gen ed kid who's pretty smart, and we're staying in Norwalk. So, I just hope that the mayor's office, again, the Common Council and the BET recognizes what you guys do and allocates sufficient funding and reasonable funding to let you guys do what you need to do and do it well. So I just want to make that comment since we're recording.
No, I appreciate that, Eric. We really need all the support we can get. Like we really have great ideas. The new strategic plan is a great tool that's going to set the path forward. We have some great milestones to achieve, and I think we have the right team to do it. We just want to make sure we have the resources to do the work ahead, because as we continue to grow programs, and like the previous administration wanted to do, we have the same focus, keeping our kids in district and broadening the scope of services. It's something that requires resources, right? And we want to make sure that we are well resourced to provide all of our students what they need, and that they don't have to leave our district to get a service that we could potentially provide within district. But not only have the program, but have high quality programming that meets the needs of all of our students. That's our ultimate goal. And that our parents see us as partners. The team today met with many of the advocates that many of our parents have relationships with, because we really want to triangulate and understand from different people what has been working, what has not been working, and what are the things we need to do to make things better, but also be partners in the effort. This is not supposed to be a fight. This is supposed to be the work of being in service to you, your child, to make sure that they are successful. And I think a lot of times what I heard was that there was an uphill battle. And as a parent of 2 children with special needs, I totally understand the challenge. So I want to make sure that wherever I can alleviate many of the obstacles that I personally had to go through myself as a parent, navigating the process. And if I have the background that I have, and it was a challenge, I can only imagine what it's like for individuals that are not in education. So I have a personal commitment to this work, and I'm really looking forward to making what we have better, and making Norwalk a model for the state and for the country.
Thanks to you and your team, truly.
And to you guys help us a lot, Eric, because your feedback helps us get better. So thank you.
All right. Well, what a great way to end the meeting. Does anybody have anything else before we go? All right. And please do continue to keep us honest, to send in your emails, and we'll continue to do these thought exchanges and check in with all of you along the way. this roadmap that Dr. Estrella has led us on. So with that, it is 6:41 p.m. and we can conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.